Very first thing, the property title. So when we look at a parcel of land, we've really got to understand what that title is and what's attached to it. So it's a legal document, obviously, describes what it is. Everything's got a title, okay? It can be vacant, can have a building on it, apartments, whatever. It can be anything, all right? Someone or some entity owns every parcel of land. So if it's not one of us or a corporate entity, it belongs to the Crown, so the government. On a title, people can place any of these. So when we create a land subdivision, for example, we might have, the land might be very, very deep, but we don't want to put a second road in, so we provide access to a block of land at the rear, commonly called battle axe. There's a battle axe drive, a long, thin driveway to a block of land at the rear of the street front. So they've got a little bit of a street frontage, but they might only get a metre of land. But then they're allowed to drive on the front block of land as a driveway. So they might have an easement to be able to drive down there. There's rights of carriageway. There's all sorts of things. You might have the electricity authority might have a drain. That'd be really interesting, wouldn't it? Might have an aerial cable or subterranean cable running across the back of your site. Sewer. Sewer's really interesting, particularly in New South Wales, because Sydney Water don't actually have to have an easement to run a pipe through your property. They have statutory rights under the Sydney Water Act to be able to do that. But everybody else actually has to have an easement. So you might have an easement for drainage. That parcel of land out in the back might be up at the top of the hill and it might have to drain through your property. So when the subdivision's created, maybe they create an easement for drainage. So there's all sorts of things there. A caveat, sorry I should have started at the top. A caveat is where somebody has an interest in your parcel of land. So for example, I might acquire a parcel of land, and we'll talk about acquisition, the actual types of acquisitions, but I might make an offer and it might be accepted for me to buy a parcel of land on some sort of terms and conditions. And because we've got some interesting form of agreement, and we'll talk more about it later, I might be able to place a caveat over the property which prevents that person from selling the land without dealing with me. So they can't actually transfer title. So it was very interesting. I found looking at acquiring a site recently, I found a sliver of land, a metre wide, in between 9 houses in a row. And this sliver of land was L-shaped, went up the boundary of 2 properties and across the back of 3 into a side street. A metre of land. Could I find the owner of that land? Couldn't find them. Had to go and do title searches, ultimately found out who owned that land, and it was a pair of brothers who, one of them died in 1912, and the other brother, I'm guessing, is not alive today, but can't find them. So it was really interesting. You know, how do you deal with that? Because here's a 1 metre wide strip of land stopping me from consolidating this whole property. So I ring council and I just say, hey guys, look, I know you can't tell me who they are, but is anyone paying their rates on that land? And council said, yes, we send rate notices out to a particular address and those rates get paid every quarter. So there's someone who doesn't actually have their name on the title of that land, who's obviously an heir in title over time, right? So they could actually claim the ownership of that land, right? But they are paying these rates. That's interesting enough. But the thing that was really interesting is there's actually a caveat lodged on that parcel of land. So no one can transact with that until this caveat is cleared. And that caveat was placed by the Registrar General of New South Wales on that property because one brother died. And back in the early 1900s, when someone died, prior to them getting probate and their assets being distributed, the Registrar General used to put caveats on properties to stop any sort of transaction from happening until probate had been resolved. But because no one finalised probate, it's got this caveat from 1912. And so my lawyers have said, I've never seen anything like that before. I ended up having to ring the Registrar General and find out what this was all about, and they explained how it all worked. So it is very uncommon. But that caveat that's sitting there since 1912, no one can sell that land until that's lifted. That's really interesting. It's very interesting what caveats can do. Yeah, it's not huge, particularly if you're family. The other thing is that sliver of land, someone's actually been using it. So 3 properties have actually sort of put their fence up, and that's part of their backyard. So they have adverse possession rights as well, because they've been there for 100 years. So it's really, really interesting. Really interesting. Mortgages, obviously you borrow money, you can have a mortgage over the property. Covenants are generally placed by a developer. If you buy a property in an area where the subdivision was created sort of again in the early 1900s, quite often what you'll have is a covenant that you must have brick walls and a slate roof, or a tiled roof. You can't do metal roofs. So they placed covenants to control the quality of the product that was actually being built on the land that they created. Nowadays, you generally find in the new subdivisions that are happening is that the developer will put covenants that you cannot erect colour bond fences, you cannot erect any for sale signs until the developer has sold his last lot in that subdivision. And that's about controlling the look of the place, because if a developer's got 6 parcels of land left out of 40, and you bought a house, bought a block of land and built a house, and you're trying to sell it to make a profit, they don't want you to put a for sale sign up out in front of your place, because it detracts from them being able to sell their land. So there's this whole myriad of different covenants that are placed, and they're time-based covenants. So they'll run until the developer's finished. Colour bond fences, lots of developers hate them. It's up to you whether you like them or not. It's a personal thing, but developers don't like colour bond fences being erected because, again, it detracts from the estate, how it looks. So they try and minimise that.
Hi, this is Steve Chandler. Thank you for watching the video. Please subscribe below for further videos on how to be a property developer. And don't forget to share this video with any of your friends and family who may also want to be a property developer.